The chandeliers shimmered like captured starlight above Elena's head, casting golden shadows across 200 guests who would come to witness what everyone called the perfect wedding. But Elena Chen stood frozen in the bride's preparation room, staring at her reflection, wondering why her hands wouldn't stop trembling. "You look like an angel who forgot how to fly," her sister Maya said, adjusting the veil for the third time. Elena forced a smile. Just nerves. But it wasn't nerves. It was the dream she'd had for 7 consecutive nights. A dream of storm clouds splitting open, of a voice calling her name in a language she somehow understood but had never heard before. A dream of hands reaching through impossible darkness, searching for hers. Downstairs, Daniel Rothschild checked his watch for the 5th time in as many minutes. Tall, handsome, heir to a pharmaceutical empire, he was everything a practical woman could want. Safe, predictable, comfortable as old furniture. "You ready to do this, brother?" His best man clapped his shoulder. Daniel nodded, though something cold coiled in his stomach, a feeling he couldn't name, a warning he refused to hear. The ceremony began at exactly 7 o'clock. Elena walked down an aisle lined with white roses and baby's breath, her father's arm steady beneath her shaking hand. The string quartet played Pachelbel's canon. Everything proceeded according to plan. Until the storm arrived. It started as a hum, so low that only 3 people in the ballroom felt it in their bones. Elena was one of them. The second was the elderly woman in the back row who had survived Hiroshima. The third was a child who would later tell his therapist about the day music became visible. The hum became a whine, then a shriek. The chandeliers swung like pendulums, counting down to apocalypse. Wine glasses shattered in a cascading symphony. Somewhere, a woman screamed, but the sound seemed to come from underwater, distant and distorted. Above the altar, where Elena and Daniel stood with their hands barely touching, the air began to tear. Not metaphorically. The atmosphere itself split open like fabric giving way to scissors, revealing not the ceiling above, not the sky beyond, but something else entirely. A darkness that pulsed with colors that had no names in any human language. Through this impossible wound in reality stepped a woman. She was tall, taller than any human had a right to be, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her eyes were triple-pupilled and gleamed like polished obsidian. She wore what looked like armor made from solidified starlight, and when she moved, the air around her rippled with displacement. "Elena Marie Chen," the woman said, and her voice resonated in frequencies that made teeth ache and hearts stutter. "Elena Marie Chen, I am Thryxis of the Dimensional Accord. I have traveled through 17 layers of reality to reach this moment. Your wedding cannot proceed." 200 guests sat paralyzed. The minister dropped his Bible. Daniel's face had gone the color of spoiled milk. But Elena felt something else entirely. Recognition, as if some forgotten part of her soul had just remembered its native language. "Why?" Elena heard herself ask, her voice surprisingly steady. Thryxis raised one impossibly long hand. Between her fingers, reality rippled again, and through the distortion stepped a man. He stumbled slightly as his feet met solid floor, disoriented, breathing hard. He wore clothes that almost resembled a tuxedo, but seemed assembled by someone who had only heard tuxedos described secondhand. The proportions slightly wrong, the fabric catching light in ways that cotton and polyester never could. But his face, dear God, his face. "No," Elena whispered, because the man looking at her with desperate, hungering eyes that held the weight of lifetimes wore Daniel's face. Not similar, not reminiscent, identical in every detail. Same sharp jawline, same slight scar above the left eyebrow from a childhood bicycle accident, same way his hair never quite laid flat in the back.
Except his eyes. Daniel's eyes were calm waters. This man's eyes were ocean storms. "Elena," he breathed, and the way he said her name made her knees weak, as if her name were a prayer he'd been whispering in darkness for 1,000 years. "What is this?" Daniel, her Daniel, demanded, finding his voice. "Some kind of trick? A prank?" "Not a trick, a correction. This man is Kieran Rothschild, from Earth 7, where reality bent differently on the day you were born. In his world, Elena, you and he found each other 5 years ago. You've loved each other through dimensions I cannot name. You were meant to marry today, but marry him, not this hollow echo standing beside you." "That's insane," Daniel spat. "I'm not an echo. I'm real. We are real." He grabbed Elena's hand, but she barely felt his touch. Because she was staring at Kieran, and memories that weren't memories were flooding her consciousness. Coffee shop conversations that never happened. A kiss in the rain outside a museum she'd never visited. His laughter, God, that laughter, while they danced in a kitchen at 3 in the morning to music only they could hear. Impossible memories, crystal clear and absolutely impossible. "What's happening to me?" Elena gasped. "The barriers between probabilities are thin tonight. Your consciousness is bleeding through, touching the life you lived in parallel. The life you were supposed to live here, had fate not miscalculated."
The police arrived, then the paramedics, then, inevitably, the scientists, government officials with credentials that granted access to impossibilities. They couldn't make Thryxis leave, couldn't make the portal close, couldn't explain how a man could exist in 2 places wearing the same DNA like a shared suit. So they quarantined the entire wedding venue, sealed it, set up a perimeter that grew larger by the hour as news helicopters circled overhead like mechanical vultures. Inside, Elena sat in what had been the catering area, staring at her hands, while 2 versions of the same man stood on opposite sides of the room, watching her with identical faces but entirely different souls. "You have 7 days," Thryxis had announced, before withdrawing to some corner where the dimensional barriers were thinnest. 7 days before the portal destabilizes, before the bleeding between worlds becomes catastrophic. Kieran must return to Earth 7, or both realities will begin collapsing into each other. Imagine buildings occupying the same space, the same person breathing the same air. Reality cannot sustain such paradox. "Then send him back now," Daniel had argued. But Kieran had looked at Elena with those storm-filled eyes and said, "I need to know. I need her to know what we had, what we could still have." And Elena, God help her, had said, "I need to know too." Now, 3 hours into the strangest hostage situation in human history, Maya brought Elena a cup of coffee that had long since gone cold. "Talk to me," Maya said. "Tell me you're not actually considering this insanity." "I don't know what I'm considering," Elena admitted. "Maya, I can see his memories. When I close my eyes, I can feel—" She trailed off, unable to articulate the sensation. "It's like there's a phantom limb. An entire life I never lived but somehow remember living." "That's not possible." "None of this is possible," Elena laughed, high and brittle. "But it's happening anyway." Across the room, Daniel paced like a caged animal. Periodically, he would glance at Kieran with naked hostility, at this doppelganger who threatened everything Daniel had built his future around. Kieran, for his part, sat perfectly still, watching Elena with the patience of someone who had already lost her once and refused to waste a second of borrowed time. "He scares me," Maya admitted quietly. "The other one. The way he looks at you, it's not natural. It's obsessive." "No, it's recognition. He's looking at me the way someone looks at their home after years of exile." That's even scarier. Maybe it was. But it also made Elena's heart hammer in ways that Daniel's presence never had.
Even now, planning their wedding, she'd felt like she was checking items off an optimization algorithm. Compatible incomes, similar life goals, mutual attractions sufficient for procreation. But Kieran looked at her like she was the only equation worth solving, like she was the proof to some theorem he'd spent lifetimes trying to demonstrate.
On the second day, Elena asked to speak with Kieran alone. Daniel protested. The government observers protested. Even Maya protested. But Thryxis simply waved one long-fingered hand, and suddenly Elena and Kieran stood in a bubble of privacy. Sound couldn't penetrate in or out, though they remained visible to the anxious watchers beyond. "Thank you," Kieran said. His voice was Daniel's voice, but weathered, deepened by experiences Elena couldn't fathom. "I need to understand," Elena said. "Make me understand how this is possible." So Kieran told her. About Earth 7, where Elena's parents never divorced, where she'd pursued music instead of law, where a chance encounter in a bookstore had led to coffee, which led to dinner, which led to 5 years of a love so consuming that when dimensional theorists discovered the possibility of parallel worlds, Kieran had volunteered for the experimental transit program. "I had to find you," he said simply. "When the barriers started thinning and I caught glimpses of other Elenas in other worlds, I saw you here, saw you marrying him, my echo, my shadow self, who never knew what he had. I couldn't let it happen, not without trying to give you the choice." "But I don't remember," Elena protested weakly. "I don't remember any of that life." "Don't you?" Kieran stepped closer, and Elena's breath caught. "Close your eyes, Elena. Tell me what you see." She shouldn't have. Every rational fiber of her being screamed warnings, but she closed her eyes. And there it was, flooding her consciousness like a dam breaking. Not her life, but a life. Walking through autumn leaves in a park she'd never visited. Kieran's fingers interlaced with hers, his thumb drawing lazy circles on her palm. The way he'd proposed on a rooftop garden while fireworks painted the sky in celebration of a holiday they didn't have here. The morning after their first night together, when he'd made her breakfast and burned the eggs so badly that they ordered pizza instead, laughing until tears streamed down their faces. She could taste those memories, feel them in her marrow. "How?" she gasped, eyes flying open. "How is this in my head?" Consciousness doesn't obey the same boundaries as matter. We're entangled, you and I. Across every probability, every version of reality where we found each other, the feelings bleed through. The connection transcends dimensionality. He raised his hand, palm out, not quite touching her face, but close enough that she could feel warmth radiating from his skin. "I'm not asking you to remember intellectually," he whispered. "I'm asking you to feel. What does your heart know that your mind can't accept?" Elena's hand rose of its own volition, matching his gesture, their palms separated by a hair's breadth of superheated air. And she felt it. A pull. A gravity that had nothing to do with mass or physics. A belonging so profound it hurt. "This is insane," she breathed. "Yes," Kieran agreed. "Insane, impossible, and absolutely true." Daniel demanded his turn. On the third day, he cornered Elena in the hallway outside what had once been the ballroom. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, his perfect wedding hair disheveled. "You're considering it," he said. Not a question, an accusation. Elena couldn't deny it. "Daniel, we have a life planned, a future. We put a deposit on the house in Westchester. Your mother already bought furniture for the nursery we're supposed to have in 2 years. His voice cracked. "I thought I knew you." "You do know me," Elena said, but the words felt hollow. "Do I?" Daniel laughed bitterly. "Because the woman I know is practical, logical. She doesn't throw away reality for some interdimensional fantasy with a man who shouldn't exist."
He's more real than you think, Elena said quietly. He's wearing my face, my body. He's a copy, Elena, a forgery. And you're looking at him like he's the original and I'm the fake? There it was, the truth that Daniel had been circling but couldn't articulate until now. Maybe, Elena said slowly, you're both real, both original, just different. How? We have the same DNA, the same memories of childhood. I remember falling off that bike, getting this scar. He pointed to his eyebrow. So does he. How does that work? I don't know, Elena admitted. Thryxis tried to explain about quantum branching, about how every choice creates a new timeline, but it's nonsense, Daniel cut her off. Convenient nonsense designed to make you doubt yourself, doubt us. He grabbed her shoulders, not hard, but desperately. I love you, Elena. I know I don't say it enough. I know I'm not poetic or dramatic, but I'm real. I'm here. I won't disappear when the portal closes. Can he promise you that? Elena pulled away gently. That's not fair. None of this is fair, Daniel shouted. Then quieter, broken. Please, please don't leave me for a dream. But that was the problem, Elena realized. Kieran wasn't a dream. He was a possibility. A road not taken. A version of happiness she hadn't known existed. And now that she'd seen it, tasted it, felt it humming in her bones, could she go back to contentment? Could she choose comfort over passion, safety over soul-deep recognition? On the fourth night, Elena found Thryxis standing beneath the portal, watching colors swirl that human eyes weren't designed to process. You knew, Elena said. When you came here, you already knew what I would choose. Thryxis turned, and her triple-pupilled eyes reflected Elena's face in triplicate. Did I? Don't play games. You're from a civilization that can punch holes between dimensions. You must be able to see probability, calculate outcomes. We can see many things, Thryxis agreed. But consciousness remains the variable that defies computation. Hearts do not follow equations, Elena Chen. They follow their own mathematics, chaotic, beautiful, and utterly unpredictable. Then why come? Why give me this impossible choice? Thryxis was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice had changed, become almost gentle, though the frequencies still made Elena's bones ache. Because there are some mistakes the universe makes that echo across all realities. Some connections that should have formed but didn't. We call them dimensional dissonances. When we detect them, we have the authority to attempt correction. So you're saying Daniel and I are wrong? A mistake? I'm saying that in 97% of observable realities, you and Kieran find each other. In those timelines, you both shine brighter, accomplish more, create ripples of positive outcome that cascade through your civilization. But in this reality, through a series of improbable micro-choices and random quantum fluctuations, you found his echo instead. A man who wears the same flesh, but lacks the complementary soul. Elena's mind reeled. You're telling me that love is destiny? That there's some cosmic plan? No. Thryxis' expression shifted into something that might have been a smile, though with her alien features, it was hard to tell. I'm telling you that some souls recognize each other across impossibility. And when they're separated by the thin walls between worlds, it creates a kind of gravitational field, a longing that transcends physics. But if I go with him, I leave everything, my family, my world, everything I've ever known. Yes. And if I stay, he has to go back, and both of us live with the knowledge of what we could have had? Also, yes. That's cruel. That's existence, Thryxis corrected. Every choice is an act of creation and destruction. Every moment you say yes to one possibility, you murder 1,000 others. This is simply the first time you've been forced to see the corpses of your unmade futures. Elena stared at the portal, at the swirling impossibility of it. If I go through, can I ever come back? No, the portal will collapse behind Kieran when he returns. The dimensional barriers will reseal. You would be committing to Earth 7 permanently. And if the portal closes with him still here? Then both realities begin to degrade. Imagine the same space trying to contain two objects simultaneously. Imagine your atoms and your Earth 7 counterparts' atoms attempting to occupy identical coordinates. The collision would cascade. Within weeks, both worlds would tear themselves apart. So, he has to go back? He has to go back, Thryxis confirmed. The only question is whether you go with him.
On the 6th day, Elena asked both men to meet her in the venue's garden, a small courtyard that had been sealed within the quarantine zone. Thryxis had arranged for privacy again, that strange bubble of silence where the three of them could speak without the world listening. Daniel arrived first, hope and terror warring in his expression. Kieran came second, moving with the careful deliberation of a man walking to either his execution or his salvation. I need to say something, Elena began, her voice steadier than she felt. And I need you both to let me finish. Daniel nodded stiffly. Kieran simply watched her with those storm-filled eyes. Daniel, Elena said, turning to him first. You're a good man. You've never lied to me, never hurt me. You've been kind and considerate and everything a woman is supposed to want. And I did want you still, in the way you want something that makes sense, something that fits neatly into the life you planned. Daniel, Elena started, but she held up a hand. But I don't love you the way you deserve to be loved. I love you like comfortable shoes, like a warm coat on a cold day. Safe, reliable, adequate. The words hit Daniel like physical blows. His face crumpled. And that's not your fault, Elena continued, her tears streaming down her face now. You didn't do anything wrong. We didn't do anything wrong. We were never supposed to be the great love story. We were supposed to be the comfortable epilogue. She turned to Kieran, and her breath caught at the naked longing in his expression. And you, she said, you terrify me, because when I look at you, I see everything I could be, everything I could feel, a depth of connection that I didn't know was possible. You make me want to be reckless, to abandon reason, to leap into the unknown and trust that you'll catch me. Kieran's hands trembled. Elena. But I can't, she whispered. I can't go with you. The words dropped into the silence like stones into still water. Kieran's face went blank with shock. Daniel's hand snapped up, hope kindling in his eyes. What? Kieran breathed. I can't abandon my world, Elena said, tears flowing freely now. My family, my sister, my mother who's been planning this wedding for a year, my father who walked me down that aisle.
They're not perfect, but they're mine. This reality, flawed and mundane and sometimes disappointing, it's mine. But Kieran started. Let me finish, Elena said firmly. I can't go with you. But Daniel, I can't marry you either. Daniel's hope shattered visibly. Elena, no. You deserve someone who looks at you the way I look at Kieran. Someone who chooses you not because you make sense, but because they can't imagine breathing without you. And I deserve, she paused, collecting herself. I deserve to know that I'm capable of feeling what I feel for Kieran, even if I can't have him, even if it destroys me. I need to know that I'm capable of that depth, that passion. She looked between them both. So tomorrow, when the portal closes, Kieran will return to Earth 7. And Daniel, our engagement ends. Not because either of you failed, but because I finally understand what I'm capable of feeling, and I refuse to settle for less than that possibility, even if it means being alone.
On the 7th day, the entire world watched through dozens of camera lenses as the portal began to collapse. Thryxis stood at the threshold, her armor gleaming. Kieran stood beside her, dressed once more in his almost tuxedo, looking at Elena with a heartbreak so profound it seemed to pull at the fabric of reality itself. I will find a way back, Kieran said, somehow. The dimensional accords technology is advancing. In 5 years, 10, 20, I will find a way to see you again. Don't, Elena said, her voice breaking. Don't spend your life chasing a ghost. Go back to Earth 7. Find that world's Elena. Love her the way you would have loved me. She died, Kieran said flatly. 3 years ago. Car accident. That's why I volunteered for the transit program. Because in a multiverse of infinite possibilities, I thought maybe I could find you again. Maybe I could have one more chance to tell you everything I never got to say when you were ripped away from me. The revelation hit Elena like a physical blow. Oh God. So you see, Kieran said with a broken smile, I've already lost you once. Losing you again doesn't get easier, it just becomes more familiar agony. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a crystal that seemed to contain entire galaxies swirling in its depths. Thryxis gave this to me. She's not supposed to. It violates about 17 interdimensional treaties, but she's a romantic in her way. He pressed the crystal into Elena's palm. It was warm, pulsing with a rhythm that matched her heartbeat. What is it? Elena whispered. A quantum entangled communicator. It's keyed to my consciousness across dimensional barriers. You won't be able to speak to me, won't be able to see me, but when you hold it, I'll know. I'll feel you thinking of me, and you'll feel me thinking of you. A connection that transcends the boundaries between worlds. That's not enough, Elena sobbed. No, Kieran agreed. But it's everything I can give you. He cupped her face in his hands, the first and last time he would touch her in this reality, and kissed her forehead with a tenderness that made the watching world collectively hold its breath. In every universe where we find each other, I love you. In every probability, every quantum possibility, there is no version of existence where my soul doesn't recognize yours. Then he stepped back, squared his shoulders, and walked toward the portal. Daniel stood off to the side, his own face wet with tears, grief for what he'd lost, but also perhaps relief at escaping a marriage that would have slowly suffocated them both. The portal swirled, colors bleeding into colors that human languages had no names for. Kieran paused at the threshold, looked back one last time. Thank you for teaching me that some loves are worth losing everything for, even if I lost. Then he stepped through, and the portal collapsed with a sound like reality sighing in relief. 3 years later, Elena stood in the laboratory, White walls, sterile equipment, the hum of machines that calculated probabilities humanity was only beginning to comprehend. She wore a lab coat now, not a wedding dress. Her hair was shorter, her eyes carried the particular exhaustion of someone who had learned to function on hope and caffeine in equal measure. The Dimensional Research Initiative had accepted her application immediately. Turned out that being present at humanity's first confirmed contact with parallel realities made her resume rather compelling. She'd spent 36 months studying quantum entanglement, learning the mathematics of dimensional barriers, working alongside the brightest minds who were trying to crack the impossible equation. Could humanity ever punch through the walls between worlds the way Thryxis had? The answer, after 3 years of relentless research, was no. The technology was centuries beyond human capability. The energy requirements alone would drain entire power grids. And even if these somehow managed to create a stable portal, the Dimensional Accord had made their position clear. Unauthorized transit between realities was forbidden. They would close any portal humans attempted to open. Elena's supervisor had broken the news to her 6 months ago. She'd nodded, smiled politely, then gone to the bathroom and cried until her throat was raw. Now she stood in the observation room, holding the crystal Kieran had given her. It still pulsed warm against her palm, still carried that impossible connection across barriers that would never fall. Her phone buzzed. A text from her sister Maya. "Dinner tonight? There's someone I want you to meet." Maya had been trying to set her up for 2 years now. Kind men, successful men, men who didn't carry the ghost of a parallel universe in their eyes. Elena had gone on exactly 3 dates. Each one felt like a betrayal. Each one ended with her holding the crystal and feeling Kieran's consciousness reaching back, even though they would never touch again. She typed back, "Can't. Working late." It was a lie. She'd finished her shift hours ago. But the truth, that she'd rather sit alone with the echo of a man she could never have than try to build something real with someone available, felt too pathetic to articulate. The lab door opened. Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the initiative's lead researcher, stepped inside. Her expression was strange, careful. "Elena," she said quietly, "there's something you need to see." Elena followed her to the main research chamber, where the team had been conducting experimental measurements on dimensional barrier fluctuations. The equipment was more sophisticated now, able to detect the faint signatures of parallel worlds pressing against their reality, like hands against glass. On the main screen, a readout pulsed. Coordinates, energy signatures, probability calculations. "We detected an anomaly 6 hours ago, a thinning in the dimensional barriers. Not natural, not random. Someone on the other side is trying to break through." Elena's heart stopped. "Where?" Dr. Tanaka pulled up a map. A single point glowed red in the mountains of Tibet, a remote monastery that had been abandoned for decades. "The calculations suggest the barrier will be at its weakest point in approximately 48 hours. Whatever's trying to come through, we estimate it will succeed." Elena stared at the coordinates, barely breathing. "Is it them? The Dimensional Accord?" "We don't know, but Elena..." Dr. Tanaka turned to face her. "The energy signature matches the one we recorded from Thryxis' portal. Whoever's coming through, they're using the same technology." The crystal in Elena's pocket burned hot, hotter than it had ever been. Not just warm, searing. Elena pulled it out, gasping. The galaxies inside were spinning faster, brighter, pulsing in a rhythm that felt like a scream. Or a call. "I need to go there." "Elena, we can't authorize." "I'm not asking for authorization." Elena was already moving, grabbing her coat. "I'm telling you, I will be there. Court-martial me, fire me, I don't care. But I will be at those coordinates when that portal opens." Dr. Tanaka studied her for a long moment. Then, incredibly, she smiled.
The initiative has a helicopter on standby for rapid response to dimensional anomalies. It leaves in 2 hours. I suppose you should be on it. For research purposes, of course.
Elena could have kissed her. The helicopter touched down in the Tibetan mountains as the sun set behind peaks that looked like the spine of a sleeping god. The air was thin here, cold, each breath visible as frost. The abandoned monastery clung to the mountainside like a memory that refused to fade. Prayer flags hung in tatters, whispering in wind that seemed to carry voices from other worlds. Elena stood in the courtyard, alone. The research team had set up equipment at a safe distance, but she'd asked them to give her space. If this was Kieran, and God, she didn't dare hope, couldn't survive the disappointment if it wasn't, she needed to face him alone. The crystal in her hand was vibrating now, humming at frequencies that made her teeth ache. Sunset bled into twilight. Twilight surrendered to darkness. And then, at precisely 11:47 p.m. local time, the air above the courtyard began to tear. The same sound Elena remembered from her wedding night, that terrible shriek of reality giving way. The same colors bleeding through that had no names in human language. But this portal was smaller, unstable, flickering like a candle about to go out. Through it stepped not Thryxis, but Kieran. He looked older, thinner. His almost tuxedo was scorched and torn, blood ran from his nose. His hands shook as he clutched a device that looked like it was cannibalizing itself to keep the portal open. "Elena!" he gasped, and his voice was wrecked with exhaustion. "I had 30 seconds. The Accord sensors will detect this breach any moment. They'll send enforcers, they'll—" He stopped, swaying on his feet. Elena rushed forward, catching him as he collapsed. The device fell from his hands, sparking, dying. "You came," she breathed, tears streaming down her face. "You idiot! You beautiful idiot! You came!" "Had to," Kieran whispered. His eyes were clearer now, focused on her face with desperate intensity. "Spent 3 years building this, stealing technology, running calculations. The Accord has a warrant for my arrest. I'm a dimensional criminal now. But I had to see you, had to ask—" His voice cracked. "Would you come with me? If I could promise you safe passage, would you—" "Yes," Elena said immediately. "Yes, you insane, wonderful man. Yes." Kieran's face transformed. Joy and disbelief and something too vast to name. "The portal's collapsing," he said urgently, struggling to his feet. Behind him, the tear in reality was already shrinking. "We have maybe 20 seconds. If we go now, together, we can make it to Earth 7 before—" The air exploded with light. 5 figures materialized around them, Thryxis and 4 others like her, wearing armor that seemed to be made from condensed authority. "Kieran Rothschild, you have violated the Dimensional Transit Accords. You have stolen restricted technology. You have endangered the stability of multiple realities." "I don't care," Kieran said flatly. "Arrest me, execute me, but let me take her with me first." "That is not your decision to make." One of the other enforcers stepped forward. "The human Elena Chen is a resident of Earth Prime. Unauthorized transit would constitute abduction." "She said she went," Kieran argued desperately. "She consents. You can't—" "The Accords are clear," the enforcer said. But Thryxis raised one long-fingered hand. "Wait." She turned to Elena, those triple-pupilled eyes unreadable. "Elena Chen, you understand what you're choosing? If you go with him, you abandon your reality permanently. Your family will never know what happened to you. Your world will list you as missing, and Kieran will face prosecution for his crimes, possibly decades in an interdimensional prison. You would be going with him into an uncertain future at best and catastrophe at worst." Elena looked at Kieran.
at this man who had crossed impossible distances, risked everything, become a criminal across multiple realities, all for 30 seconds in her presence? She thought about her comfortable life, her research, her sister's dinner invitations, the safe, predictable future she could have. Then she thought about the crystal that had burned in her palm for 3 years, the connection that had sustained her through loneliness, the certainty that had grown in her bones. Some loves were worth any cost. "I understand," Elena said clearly, "and I choose him. I choose him across every reality, in every probability. I choose the man who would burn down the laws of physics for half a minute with me over any future that doesn't have him in it."
Thryxis was silent for a long moment. Then she turned to her fellow enforcers. "You heard the human. She consents. The Accords prohibit unauthorized abduction, but they say nothing about voluntary emigration." "You're twisting the law," one enforcer protested. "I'm interpreting it," Thryxis corrected. "And I interpret that consciousness, true consciousness, soul-deep choosing, supersedes geographical restrictions." She looked at Elena and Kieran. "You have 15 seconds before this portal collapses entirely. I suggest you use them." Kieran grabbed Elena's hand. His fingers were real, solid. Finally, impossibly, here. Together, they ran toward the collapsing portal. "We'll have to run from the Accord," Kieran shouted as they ran. "Hide, maybe for years." "I don't care," Elena laughed, crying, euphoric. "As long as we're running together." They hit the portal at a dead sprint. Reality twisted, inverted, compressed them through dimensions that human consciousness wasn't designed to comprehend. And then they were through. They collapsed onto grass that was subtly the wrong color green, under a sky that held one too many moons, in a world that smelled like Elena's world, but with notes of something indefinably other. Earth 7. Kieran pulled her into his arms, and finally, they kissed. Not the chaste forehead kiss of goodbye, but the desperate, consuming kiss of people who had crossed universes to reach each other. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Elena looked around at this alien, familiar world. "What now?" she asked. "Now," Kieran said, grinning despite the blood still on his face, despite their uncertain future. "We run. The Accord will come looking. We'll have to move constantly, change identities, live on the edges of civilization." "Sounds terrible," Elena said. "Completely terrible," Kieran agreed. "When do we start?" "Right now." He stood, pulling her up with him. "There's a safe house about 20 kilometers from here. Friends who owe me favors. We can rest there, plan our next move." Elena took his hand, lacing their fingers together the way she'd done in memories that weren't memories. "Lead the way." As they walked away from the coordinates where the portal had collapsed forever, Elena felt the crystal in her pocket one last time. It had gone cold, dead. Its purpose fulfilled. She didn't need it anymore, because she was walking beside the man whose consciousness had echoed across dimensions to reach her. They were fugitives now, outlaws in the eyes of beings that enforced the laws of reality itself, but they were together. Finally, impossibly, irrevocably. And if Elena had learned anything from loving across parallel worlds, it was this. Some connections were worth breaking every law in every universe to preserve. Behind them, on Earth Prime, Dr. Tanaka would file a report. Maya would receive a letter Elena had written months ago, to be opened only if she disappeared, explaining everything, saying goodbye, promising her love would transcend even dimensional boundaries. Her world would move on without her, as all worlds must. But Elena had already moved on too, into an uncertain future with a wanted man in a reality that wasn't her own, and she had never been more certain of anything in any lifetime. The sun, slightly more orange than Earth Prime's sun, was rising over Earth 7's horizon
as Elena and Kieran disappeared into mountains that looked almost but not quite like the ones they'd left behind. Together. Finally. Forever.